I'm Ted Spence. I'm chair of the CEWF Executive Committee, and I want to welcome everybody here, both those of you in the room and those online. And we've got an interesting set of discussions, I suspect, given the circumstances that we're all facing on our lakes and rivers, with one of the most extreme seasons we've dealt with in a very long time. So I'm going to move immediately into the agenda. We have two speakers from the Trent Severn Waterway team, and following our discussion of infrastructure and water management, we're going to have a question and answer period. After that point, I think we're probably the Trent Severn people are going to have to leave us. So it's important that we use that question and answer period for our discussion. And then we'll be moving into some business related to CEWF and what we've been doing and where we're going. So let me start by introducing Colin Clark. Please. Colin is the acting dam asset manager. He's been at it for 3 years though, so he can't hide too much behind that acting title. He's very much responsible for surveying all of the dams in the system, and that's more than 100 dams on the Trent side, and identifying issues and problems, and planning for maintenance and refurbishments and replacements, and he'll be explaining his role. No, it should.
Slides there.
Yes, that was later. Yeah. Colin has been with Ontario Waterways for 11 years now. He spent a couple of years in the acting water manager role, right at the back in 2012 back in 2016 and 17. He is a registered professional engineer, and he did work in consulting for 10 years before he got into Parks Canada. So he's a very experienced guy, very helpful to us, and has been helping. Certainly, he helps us to answer your questions when you ask about the condition of your dam or what the plans are going forward. So, Colin, can you speak up?
I hope so. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
Can you hear him all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
we've got.
Oh, I'm getting a little feedback there. I think that sounds good. So do you want me to kick off the presentation here, Ted?
You're on.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. I guess I've already got the introduction, so we can skip that. So today's presentation, I've had multiple high-level topics Ted and the executive asked me to cover off this morning. So we're going to kind of fly through some of the stuff that I don't know too much about, but I'm going to update you on it, what you would normally hear from the director of Ontario Waterways. With that in mind, if I could just kick off to, the next slide. I don't have control of the mouse, so you can blame everyone else. Okay, that's good there. So part of the stuff that we would normally have the director update on is the Trent Severn Waterway Management Plan. You can find that management plan on the TSW website now, and there is a link there if you do want to get in there and check it out. And this year, there's going to be a focus on the development of a more formal water management communications protocol. I think historically, circa, about 2015, 2016, we've done a much better job than we have before. And certainly Anna and the communications team with Ryan and the rest of his team have tried to improve on that year over year with the updated website, with the all the updates, as well as the water levels website, which seems to be relatively popular. The other thing to update on is the Historic Places Act. It did not pass Parliament before the election, so it's hard to say if that's going to be reintroduced in the new Parliament. So aside from that, there's nothing we can really update you on there because it's kind of in a holding pattern. If I could go on to the next slide, please. So this is just a general background for Parks Canada dams. So across the entire agency, Parks Canada owns 240 dams, of which 185 fall within Ontario Waterways. Ontario Waterways covers off both the Trent and the Rideau Canal. So Anna does water management on both canals. I do asset management on both canals. For Trent Severn Waterway, there's 140 dams. Of those 140, 45 of them are up in Haliburton. And the Easter egg that you can ask me later is how come there's more dams than there are lakes, and we'll talk about that later. But there's 24 on the Gull, 14 on the Burnt River, and 7 in what we call the central reservoir section. Next slide, please. So one of the big questions that Ted had asked me is, Colin, how do you go through and plan which assets are going to get what type of work? So the most critical component to understanding that is when we look at the life cycle analysis. So this is a very simplified chart on all the stuff that feeds into it. But if you see the dashed line on the far left that curves down to the bottom, a brand new asset would follow that dashed line all the way down to the bottom if it received no maintenance. And in some of the cases, some of the structures on the Trent Severn Waterway and Haliburton have received very little maintenance, as you know, I don't think surprises any of you at this point. If we look up at the next line where it kind of bumps and falls down, that's when you're applying certain maintenance that's going to extend the life cycle of the structure. And you can really extend out the life cycle given appropriate maintenance at appropriate times. And that value falls all the way down to what we call the intervention level. Now, the intervention level is when the structure has reached such a point that it needs sort of major capital influx to be able to extend the life of that structure. So if we follow that line up, the first one gets you to a rehabilitation sort of situation. Now that won't get you a full life because it's not a brand new structure. So examples of rehabs that you've all seen in the lakes up there is Coshlong, which has been done for quite some time, Clobeconk, and Drag North. Now then there's some structures that are so poor, the concrete is so poor that it makes more sense economically to do a full replacement. Full replacement examples, we've done several up in Haliburton since about 2014. And then you get a service life of 80 to 100 years. Many of our structures in Haliburton have reached that 80 to 100 year lifespan already. But 2 examples that we've done recently are Kinesis and Red Pine. And those ones were basically eliminating the last of our timber crib type of structures. And now everything is concrete. Next slide, please. So when we look at the infrastructure, and if we try to tie it back in, remembering that 80 to 100 year typical lifespan. So we take a look at the age of the Haliburton infrastructure. You can see there we've got about 7 that are, that less than 10-year range. And those are all the replacements that have happened over the past few years. We've got a couple in the 40 to 60 range and the 60 to 80 range. And a lot of that was when there was large capitalization, 50 years ago, replacing some timber crib dams and making them concrete. So that would be some of your Anstruther dams and dams like that. Then you can see here, we've got a couple that are in blue that are greater than 100 years. Now, those are the ones that I keep the most look on because they're kind of outside typical life. Now, the orange bar, what that's showing you, those are dams that we have rehabbed that are also greater than 100 years. So they're going to be able to last much longer than that 100-year section. But we've got 7 or 8 that are a little over 100 years. Canning Lake's a good example. Jack Lake is also another example. It's over 100 years. And then we've got quite a few that are in 80 to 100. So the ones that usually make the most sense to focus on from an infrastructure perspective are the ones that are in that blue section that are greater than 80 to 100 years. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So the goal of these slides here is to show you what it looks like at a couple of structures that we fixed through the Federal Investment Infrastructure Program and the Federal Infrastructure Program. This is an example life cycle of drag lake dams. We have two dams on Drag Lake, the North Dam and the South Dam. For all intents and purposes, most people don't think of one dam, but since they are separated by a big rock in between the two of them, they're two different dams because they're not contiguous. So if we look at this picture here, Drag South was a complete replacement. That's that picture on the top. You can see it's all brand new concrete. There were some upgrades done there for the power plant. So that one is, brand spanking new. We're expecting a good 80 to 100 years out of that, and it's in very, very good condition. Down below is the Drag Lake North Dam. A decision was made to rehabilitate this structure rather than replace. And you can see here, if we look on the far right of this screen, where it says Drag Lake or Drag North in the green box, and there's the red dot of rehabilitation. So we're not expecting to get the same life cycle out of Drag North as we are to the Drag South Dam. So probably in the 50-year horizon from now, then we'd be probably looking at a replacement or another major rehab, depending on the condition of the structure. But that's why you can see we've got a brand new deck there, and you can see the discoloration of the old original concrete that is on there versus some new capping and facing that was done, especially under the galvanized walkway. So this dam also had some post-tension anchors and things like that installed in it to increase its stability, specifically against ice loading. Next slide, please. So here below, we have another example, but this was to show more of a maintenance type project. For those of you familiar with Elliott Falls Dam, it's on the outlet of Moore Lake. There's a power plant there. You can see the picture up at the top where we had a large cavity that dug into the side of the pier. Basically, when we were trying to hook logs, we were at the point where it could almost suck the log lifting hook into that hole. So last fall, we went in there, and throughout the winter, we repaired that section. And if you look at the lower picture, you'll be able to see where we added the new concrete, added additional mass to the backside, and patched up that hole. Now, because of the way we did that repair, we call that a maintenance repair. So if you look where it says Elliott Falls and the red dot there, the expected life extension does not go super far in terms of how much it is. That's because the level of effort applied is much lower than a rehab, where you would do quite a bit more chipping back of concrete and replace with good. This was really adding additional mass and making sure the structure was operable. Next slide, please. So some of the factors for considering for recapitalization, well, obviously we already talked about the age of the structure, and then it's also a function of the condition of the structure. And what that looks at is assessed internal or external engineering inspection. So the internal ones are ones that are completed by me or my team in Halliburton. And then we also bring in consultants from time to time. I believe there were some folks in Hawk Lake who saw my consultant out there doing an underwater inspection with the drone. Part of that is we've moved more toward drone underwater inspection because it really reduces the risks of anything happening to an underwater diver. Plus, it also does not impact water management nearly to the same extent where you would have to shut that dam off entirely to complete that inspection. So we look at those engineering inspections depending on the frequency is a function of if the dam were to fail, how much damage were to happen. So some dams, as you can imagine, could have a big impact. Some dams don't have much of an impact. So that spaces out how many how frequent the inspections are. So some of the engineering inspections are annual, some are every 5 years, depending. One of the other things that people are usually interested are the dam safety reviews. So the dam safety reviews look at partially also the internal, like the typical engineering inspection, but they also look at safety factors for stability, and that would be slipping, turning, rotating, failing under different conditions. So that would be, you would look at things like the inflow design flood. The inflow design flood in Halliburton dams right now could be the 100-year if you're a small dam like Red Pine, where you're not, if there was a failure, not much is expected to happen, up to, the 1/3, between the 1,000-year and 1/3 of the way to the PMF. So that's a very high frequency return period. So PMF, which is the probable maximum flood, is something that we set at a 1 in 100,000 year return period. So it's pretty unlikely for it to occur, but that structure at like Drag Lake, north and south combined, they can pass a great big flow like that if they had to. And then the other thing that really controls most of it is something everyone's familiar with up there. If you've ever had a crib dock, is ice loading, where the ice can go in and potentially push something over. Obviously, our structures have been up for 100 years, so we know they can withstand a whole bunch of different conditions. So those are kind of the main factors for consideration. But you may weigh more on the condition of the structure as opposed to the ability to pass the IDF, especially if it has a very high return period for the design. Next slide, please. So I was asked to lay out what would be my big dams that I want to keep an eye on moving forward, based in the future capital planning. So the ones that I'm most interested in looking at are rehabbing and replacing would be Gull 1, which is the main dam at Gull Lake, the Norland Dam, as well as the Hawk Lake Dam. And then for maintenance wise, these are ones that get smaller extensions of life. I've got Jack Lake, Percy Lake, and various. Now it says various because depending on what materials become available to me, I may be able to trigger some sort of maintenance work that will extend the life of those structures based on materials I have on hand, which makes sense for what I'm doing at Percy. Why do they fall in different groups? Basically, my group handles minor maintenance or these sort of maintenance type repairs, but we also do the capital planning. Now there's some structures that are easier for my teams to work on that are up in Halliburton for concrete repairs than it is to rehab or replace them. And that will have to do with the complexity of the phasing as well as what the winter log set is, because that impacts how high the cofferdam is, and the cofferdam is usually the most complex part of the construction, amounting to about 25% of the construction. So Gull Lake, Norland, and Hawk, they all are very tall dams and the water level stays relatively high. Jack and Percy, in this case, they have low winter sets. A big section of, say, Jack Lake's got a great big wing wall that is totally exposed that you can work on in the wintertime. And it allows us to work on it more easily without having to do great big temporary works that we're going to have to remove later. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just kind of breeze through these because I know everybody wants to keep the meeting moving, but the capital projects on the books for right now, we've got the Long Lake Dam or Musquaby, depending on where you are. You might call it Musquaby. We're looking at 2026 summer for a start, 2-year construction, and a in-place replacement. Next slide, please. The next one is Little Brother Lake Dam, also in design development, planned for 2026 summer, expected duration 2 years, in-place replacement. For those of you familiar with that particular area, we've got a beautiful new access road to get in there and support construction, which is great. This one is on the critical path for us because we have to fix it before we could tackle a place like Hawk Lake, because for some of the stuff given the complexities around Hawk Lake Dam, we're going to need to be able to divert some water through this structure. So this one needs to go before we can look at doing Hawk. Next slide, please. Capital project, Essen Lake Dam. Again, this is another 2026 summer, 2 years, in-place replacement of main dam and side dam. We'll just next slide again, please. And then we've also have right now we've got Elliott Falls Dam at concept design. We're looking to try and start that one in 2027 spring. Expected duration is 2 years, and it's a replacement of the dam. I can't tell you if it's going to be in the same place, slightly downstream yet, because we're still at the concept options phasing there of what it's going to look like. But I'm expecting there likely be more capacity at that particular structure in the future. Next slide, please. And the project we're working on this fall that we've got approved, we've got it construction ready. We've got a design. We're probably going to start in November and finish up around February or end of February. We're doing some repairs to the piers and abutments, the sill and the deck, and as well as some occupational health and safety improvements. So you will see us doing a little bit of work for this structure this year. Water management wise, the other two structure, the main structure at Gull Lake 1, which is the main dam, will still be fully operable. And we phase this work such that we'll be able to pass some water through at least one of these spillways at a time when we are doing the repair work. Next slide. That might be the last slide. We're getting near the end here. Oh, minor projects. So some projects that we did this year that we've already completed. We replaced the Redstone Lake East Dam, which is a timber deck. So it was about 30 or 35 years old. So we replaced that. So it's in good condition. We've replaced everything there. Jack Lake, since we have some plans to do some repairs there eventually on the pier of the main operating dam, we've installed a service gain, which will allow us to isolate basically block the water that goes through the main operating spillway, and then begin some repairs on the downstream pier sections. We've also made the other weir at Jack Lake operable now, so we'll be able to continue to do water management with that structure while we're doing repairs. We've had a lot of problems with ice storm damage of cleanup, and there's still some stuff we're cleaning up at the bottom end of the Gull River that's stuck all on the booms down there. And this year we've had a lot of booms that were damaged during the spring. And we'll be looking at recapitalizing quite a bit of these booms in the next 3 to 5 years. And I believe that is the last slide in 15 minutes as promised, Ted.
All right, then do we have questions? Yes.
Go ahead, Steve.
Hi, how are you this morning? Thanks for taking my question. Question is,
what percentage of dams are on private property versus public property? I'm just curious. Do we know?
Are you able to hear?
I think we've got conflicting questions. I'm hearing two at the same time, Ted.
Colin, the question is, what percentage of dams are on private property versus public property?
Well, they're all on public property, but the access for many is through private property. How's that?
Well, I recall you saying something about the Essen Lake situation where it was private.
The which one? Sorry, which one?
There it was, right?
You're going to have to say that again, Ted.
I was just asking about the Essen Lake situation where the failure on the side was on private.
Oh, the side dam. Okay, yeah, the side dam technically where it would be going back is on public property. That falls within the road allowance of the municipality. So that one is right now on public property.
In Bob Lake's case, I know it's on private property. The dam, we know this for a fact, so I don't think it's 100%. So obviously, most are on public property. Is the answer.
In particular, the questioners speaking about Bob Lake. where there's private property involved. Is that your understanding as well, Colin?
Well, we own 100% of the structure. We do have to cross private property to get to the dam. Yes.
Concrete, yeah, the land, okay.
So in the bulk of the bulk of the locations in Halliburton, we only own the actual structure and not a lot of property around it. There are some exceptions.
On our north and south part of the lake were last inspected, and what were the results of the inspection?
What is the lake?
Glamour Lake.
Disconnected people.
Colin, the question is from Glamour Lake. They would like to know when their two dams were inspected. And is it possible to see the results of those inspections?
We typically don't share the inspections. The last inspection date I could probably pull up for those. It was either last year or the year before for both of them. Yeah, I'd have to that information I can easily grab, but I don't have it here. If you want, I can if you put a summary of questions like that, I can answer those either later or in the chat when Ann is presenting. I can throw that in there. That's fine.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding the Hot Lake Dam, mainly because of the requirement to replace the log chute. Apparently, there was a question with the PSW for moving the Hot Lake Dam, which therefore withholds the replacement of the log chute. I'm just wondering whether there's a question mark there as to if that is the case, when will it happen?
Colin, it's looking for clarification on the Hawk Lake plans. It's related as well to the log chute, which is I understand being partially removed again. The question is if the dam is going to be relocated and what's the timing on it, and when will people have a better picture as to what the plan is for Hawk Lake?
I mean, Hawk Lake is outside the immediate 5-year window, so I don't have that information for you right now. Certainly, the municipality is taking a look at the log chute, and when they reinstall it, if they reinstall it, that's kind of up to them. But we'll be involved when that happens to support them during removals or whatever they choose to do there.
And when will you be reaching a decision on the location of the new dam?
We haven't even started options analysis yet, so until we've done that, I can't answer that.
Okay. Other questions?
I'm waiting to hear back as Steve Costero online from
Little Glamour.
He has a question, but he hasn't posted around here. He had his hand up in the chat.
Can we?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Steve?
Okay, I think my question may have been answered, and I am from Little Glamour, but my question pertained to the dam at the south end of Big Glamour. For many years, there was public access to that dam, and in the last few years, the road is now posted saying private property, private road, so the public is no longer permitted to access that dam at the south end of Big Glamour. I know that there are other properties along that road where people have a cottage and a farm, for example. They use that road to get in there, and it's one particular owner, I guess near the beginning, that has decided to post that. I just wondered if it was real or if it's just something he decided to put up.
It's a private access road, and to get on the dam, you have to cross private property. So that landowner, if they choose to restrict that, there's nothing we can do about that. We have rights to get in there and do the work, or work on the dam and do the water management, but it's not something to ensure that people have access to get on that structure. That wouldn't be something we'd want to spoil a relationship with our neighbor. In that case,
sure. I just wanted to get clarification on that, and that's all. I mean, we do have water access, so and we have access in the wintertime on the ice. So we have that kind of
Yeah, you can
access.
100%, you can 100% go on the dam. You just can't go on
Mhm.
their property. So, but how you would get there, I don't know, you know? So that's, and that's
Oh, yeah.
the way it is at a whole bunch of the structures. To be honest, a whole bunch of them are that way, where you have to cross private property. Long Lake is a good one where, you know, it's the people who have road access to get in there can kind of get on it. But other than that, it's, you know, the public's not really supposed to go in there. It's a private road.
Okay,
I just want
Are
thank
there any
you.
things for Colin before we move on?
Yeah,
Please.
when, would you be deciding whether you're going to rehab or replace Gull One? And when might that work take place?
The question is about Gull One. When would you be deciding whether it's going to be rehab or replacement? And when will we know that?
Yeah, it's sort of up there with Hawk in terms of we're not at that stage yet. Those are the next ones in the phase, but we kind of work through a 5-year capital plan, and none of these structures are on that plan right now. But those are the ones that I'm looking at next to start incorporating them into. So we're still a little ways away before we can do that. Both of those structures going to take a lot of thought on how we're going to manage it, especially Gull One with the water management situation there, it being the biggest structure. And doing the water diversion for replacement, whether it's a rehab or a replacement, is a function of what's the expected lifespan for cost, and so on and so forth. So that could be the concrete condition or the quality of the actual concrete. Some of the older concrete has very low compressive strength. Our newer dams are going to be all over 35. Some of the old ones are going to be in the, you know, the high teens or the low 20s. So it really depends. And then if we have bad aggregate in there, which we can find out, which was a alkali reaction, and it kind of can make the concrete swell, and it doesn't make it very good for suitable rehabilitation because it has a tendency to want to fall off. So we have to kind of get in there and do some more investigations. We have boreholes at both those structures now. So there's, you know, that will help lead into that an options analysis, but it's still a couple years away.
All right. I'm going to thank Colin for joining us this morning. We really appreciate the quick ways that he responds to questions when we raise them with him from CEWF. And I think we're confident that he's very much on top of the maintenance and the surveys of our dams, and we've seen a lot of action. The one thing he hasn't really mentioned is that funding is a big deal for the big projects, and that comes into the whole Government of Canada budget situation and how much goes to Parks Canada, and then within Parks Canada, how much gets directed to the Ontario waterways. But we've had good experience in the past, and we're hoping it will continue. Thank you very much, Colin. That's great. Please. Moving on, we're going to talk now about this year's water management, which I know is top of mind for most of us. It should say 10 cents somewhere. I guess so. Yeah, that's what he called it, I guess. Yeah, this is it. How do I put it on the slide? Show me how to advance it. There we go. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to give you a very quick overview as the context for what Anna's going to be telling us the details about this year. We're getting tired of coming to these meetings and telling you we've had an exceptional year. But each exceptional year is more exceptional than the one before. And I think as Anna will describe, haven't seen one like this for a very long time. So just reminding people, we're dealing with the Trent Severn waterway. It's a waterway of almost 400 kilometers long from Georgian Bay to Lake Ontario. We're particularly interested in the reservoir area, where we have 35 reservoirs, and it's a big deal. I just throw this map in, and I know it's in Anna's presentation too, but all of the features identified on this map of the whole Trent watershed are water control structures. So it's an immense network that Anna's responsible for, and she'll be talking about in a few minutes. And when we look at the overall Trent watershed, it's really divided into 6 areas. We're concerned with the 3 in the central top here: the Gull watershed, the Burnt watershed, and the Central Lakes, Nogies, Mississauga, Ills, and Jack watersheds. And we've been always on top of this, but it's worth thinking about how complex this system is. So here's a schematic of the Gull River watershed. And the important thing here is you can see when you get the Boschkong Lake here, you've got 3 main branches of the Gull coming together. The one from Conesus, the one from Cushog, and the one that comes down from Halliburton and Oblong Lake through Eagle and Redstone into the Maple Lake chain. And that Maple Lake chain is a large area with no control. So when you have extreme runoff in the spring from snowmelt or really extreme rainfall events, it's a huge challenge for Trent Severn to manage that at 12 Mile and not dump it all through Minden instantly. So it's a 12 Mile is like a key 12 Mile and Horseshoe are like almost like a maximum control on the flow of the upper Gull, and that Maple Lake chain is a very important consideration. Here's the Burnt River Basin. The significant thing about the Burnt River Basin is that a very large area of it downstream has no control. The Kinmount Dam is not operated very actively. And downstream from there, there's no control of any kind. And the Kinmount is not a Trent Severn dam, it's an MNRF dam. But the Gull Basin then has a huge flow component that they do not control from the lower Gull. In the upper Gull, you've got, I'm sorry, the upper Burnt, in the upper Burnt, you've got the flow down from Drag Lake through the Canning Dam, and the Canning Dam, of course, controls half a dozen significant cottage lakes that people are concerned with, from Head Lake to Grass Lake to Cashawigabog, and including Sawyer Lake, all the way down to the Canning Dam. And then you have the Irondale River. Well, you have the Central Channel there, but they also from Misquabi and Long, as Colin was mentioning. And then you have the Irondale River Channel, where there are a number of small lakes, but they all come directly into the Irondale River, which then doesn't have a major control downstream. And then in the Central Lakes, we have 5 different lakes, 4 of which flow directly to the Canal Lakes. That's Jack's, Eels, Mississauga, and Crystal, all come straight down with only the single dam control, which is both an advantage and a disadvantage. It means that Anna can get our water fast if she wants it. So thinking of water management this year, just as a quick overview, it's been an exceptional year. I was able to use this old slide and just leave that word exceptional in there. CEWF has been in regular contact with TSW. When things are happening, like all summer long this year, Anna and I have been in contact, I would say, at least once a week. We've seen the extended drought conditions since June that have resulted in really extreme low water levels all through the system. between Anna and I, we're gonna try to review the situation as it's as it's unfolded. It's important to recognize that Trent Severn manages the system according to integrated water management at the watershed level. If you go back 20 years, it wasn't at the watershed level. I would say it was for the canal. Now it's very much at the watershed level, which means that all aspects of the system are considered in the decisions that are being made. But there are also priorities. Top priority is public safety. That means trying to mitigate floods in the spring, recognizing that we're not dealing with a flood control system, but it does have impacts, and maintaining minimum flows for water supply and sewage treatment as you go down the system. There are a number of communities, most notably Peterborough and Trenton, that depend on the system for their municipal water supplies. So there is a minimum flow required through Peterborough. Even if you shut the canal down, you'd have a minimum flow through Peterborough. So, and then we have maintaining the canal draft limits from 24th of May until Thanksgiving. And Anna will be talking about how we've managed that this year. But the main control this year, as she will point out, has been the minimum flow at Peterborough, not the canal operations, because the canal operations at their extreme conservation use less water than is required at Peterborough. Then we have to, they also, as a principle, have the goal of maintaining our reservoir levels all within their historic norms. In some cases, we've been very close to that lower extreme this year. But in many other cases, we haven't been that close to it, even though we've been well below average. And then there are also fisheries constraints that you're aware of in the spring in a few areas where they need to maintain certain levels of flow for the walleye spawning. And then in the lake, getting all the lakes down to the minimum levels by the time the lake trout spawn in middle to late October. And it's always important to remember, we're not dealing with a flood control system. Because when everything's full in May and June, there's no additional storage there if we get excessive rainfalls, and to some extent we saw that this year. If we look at January to March this year, we had a dry fall, we had quite warm temperatures and rainfall. We didn't really have any snow until the last couple of days of December. The ice cover was very late forming on most of our lakes. January then turned out to be a dry month, and at the end of January, we were well below the normal snowpack. But then everything changed. February had significant snow, and by the end of the month, our snowpack was well above normal, right across the entire Trent Severn watershed. March was warmer and wetter than normal. 171% of normal precipitation, with significant rainfall events onto that above normal snowpack. We had warm temperatures as well. For example, we had 38 millimeters, that's almost 2 inches of rain on the 16th and 17th, followed by 19-degree temperatures a couple of days later. I mean, there's nothing that causes spring runoff melt faster than warm temperatures with rain onto the snow. And that was the situation we had in mid-March. Our lakes were filling very quickly. In most cases, we still had ice cover. In some cases, we had damage from that ice cover moving around. But mostly there was active water management by Trent Severn to try to minimize the rise while we still had lake ice on our reservoirs. I mean, I know from talking to Anna, she was really conscious of the fact that as our lakes came up very quickly, we still had ice and we had all the risks associated with it. At the same time, in a number of cases, the logs were out of the dams and there was so much runoff that it was impossible to manage. And then if we get to April to August, this is where a different kind of exception started to come in. Lake levels rose very quickly in late March and early and early April with rainfall on snow and warm temperatures. As I say, there were logs out of some of the dams to pass the maximum safe flow, while trying to avoid flooding with ice still on our lakes. And then we had the ice storm at the end of March, which was the last couple of days of March. But on the 3rd of April, the 2nd of April, we had 1.5 inches of rainfall right after that ice storm. Lake levels peaked by mid-April in most cases. And then there was active water management through the rest of April and May to maintain levels near average and to try to make sure that everything was going to be full for the opening of the navigation on the 24th of May. In fact, the navigation opened a few days before that because of the way the calendar was this year, and the holiday was early. And when we got to the 24th of May, Trent Severn had to close navigation from, I guess it was from Lakefield down to Trenton, because there was too much water. Too much water, because it was coming so quickly because of that extreme rainfall. Now, in June, the plan was to lower our reservoirs to about 95% full. So there would be a cushion there if we continued to see these exceptional rainfalls we've been seeing for several months. But by the time we got to the end of June, the rain had stopped. June, July, and August, very little rainfall. And we've seen extreme water management, conservation of water throughout the system since the middle of June. And we've been getting drawdown forecasts regularly from Trent Severn to give us the warnings as to what's going to happen. The levels were managed to provide that minimum flow required downstream at Peterborough and to offset evaporation. I know on one occasion, Anna told me they had 17 cubic meters a second coming out of the reservoirs, and they were only delivering 12 to Peterborough. The difference was evaporation. With that extreme high temperatures we had, sunshine and high winds. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on this, but it's worth having a quick look at this. This is and of course, this will be on our website. This is our summary of the actual precipitation at the Halliburton headquarters of Trent Severn. And you'll see there that from February, we had 118%, 171% in March, 130% in April, 120% in May, and then bang. June, only 38% of the normal rainfall. July, only 41%. And in August, we got only 26%. So the inflows were gone. The wetlands were dried. Many of them were dried up completely. The forest was extremely dry. And when we did get rainfall, it came in bursts. But I mean, a burst of rainfall over a totally dry watershed, sure, it raises the lake level by the half inch or the inch of rainfall you get. But the rest of it just goes into the wetlands and into the soil. So we weren't seeing very much, but it was really an extreme summer in terms of the lack of precipitation, and never more so than August. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen some more significant rainfalls. It only comes on Thursdays, I noticed, but we've seen it, but it's not enough to offset it. I got these figures from Trent Severn. If you look at the last column here, you can see these are the figures that came 2 weeks ago on the Thursday rainfall. But again, one of the big deals is it's so variable, because so much of this heavy rain has been thunderstorms. And so while you're getting 22 millimeters at Kinesis, they got only 8 millimeters at the Halliburton office. And you can see 12 at Maple Lake and 22 at Gillard. The important thing here is just the variability. Now, just looking quickly at a few of our lakes to see what it meant. Here's Kinesis. You can see in the spring, the water level coming up way ahead of the average dates. That's that above average snowfall with extreme rainfall and high temperatures. But then by the time we got into early May, you can see Trent Severn managing that water level actively in spite of the rainfall, managing that act almost along the average line. And then once we got to July, you see the effects of the drawdown that gradually bring us further and further and further below the average. And by the time you get down to now, the September 2nd there, you can see that we're at least 2 or 3 weeks earlier than we would expect to be from the average line to be at this level. So that's Kinesis. There's Oblong and Halliburton up at the top of the Maple Lake chain. Same thing exactly. You see the active management through the late spring and through spring, and then a smooth drawdown. I put this in as Maple Lake because this is an example of a flow-through lake. The level on Maple Lake and the whole chain is not controlled below Eagle and Redstone. It's not controlled below there, and there's a large drainage area. But you see here, once we got to June, the level was below normal, and more recently it's been way below normal. The level, I mean, because of the trying to conserve water in the system. There's Drag Lake, very similar to the others, although it was more actively managed in the spring. You can see the effects of adding and removing logs from the dam there. Here's Mississauga Lake, happens to be my lake. We pretty much touched the all-time minimum there in early August, but it's similar to others. We're about 3 weeks ahead of where we should be in our water level. Now, I want to just point out to you quickly on this. This is what you see on the screen if you go to the water level screen. See in the upper left there, you have a choice of graph or table. If you go to table, you get this. And this shows you the daily water level every day. The important thing here, if you look at this, you can see how much the water level is changing each day. Is it going up or is it going down? Is it going faster or slower? It's a very useful thing to look at. When you look at the water level graph, also look at the table to get a little more information. The other main source of information you have available to you is the weekly drawdown forecast, which we normally get on our website and on the Trent Severn website by sometime on Tuesdays. It was on the Wednesday this week because of the holiday. And what you get here is you get a 2-week forecast of how much the lakes are coming down. And it's really important to look at this and to look at it every week, because with rainfall, for example, it can change a little bit if we're lucky enough to be able to see the drawdown slow down. So you can pick any of the lakes here and read the beginning level, the end date level, and how much it's going to change. So here this week, for example, in the 2-week period we're in now, Hawk Lake is supposed to be going down 35 centimeters. That's about a foot. That's a lot of water. And the last thing I wanted to show you again is the CEWF website. The important thing here is you can get to the live water levels or the drawdown forecast with those green buttons in the middle. To the right of the green buttons, you can go to and subscribe. And that means you'll get emails from us whenever we get important information from Trent Severn. We don't send emails every morning like some of the places you just subscribe to. We only post things when we're making a substantial post to our website. And then finally, if you look at the top of this homepage, you see those 5 titles up there. There's a huge amount of information about the Trent Severn waterway, and especially about the reservoirs there, from historic documents and various reports. When you're really bored after the baseball season's over or whatever, there's a lot of stuff to look at there. So that's my overview. And now I want to turn it over to Anna to talk to us about what she's really faced this year.
did, I guess, miss the first slide. It's the competing interests and climate change. But before that, I also introduced Ryan Murphy, who's our communication team. He's online. Communications are vital for the Trans-Severn Rideau Canal water management. They convey all the information to the stakeholders, especially when we go through very heavy floods. Communications are our right hand to tackle on everything while we are busy with operations going through the heavy flow management. The two slides I always bring in my presentation are competing interests and climate change. I'm sorry, I'm repeating this again to the auditorium here, but multiple stakeholders as well as environment are impacted. That includes the public, I guess, properties along the shorelines, as well as the energy, hydro energy facilities, etc. So we do have multiple impacts as a result of high flows, erosion, etc., as well as environmental impact, and then hydrogenating facilities. Dryness, yeah, we've seen this year an example, a lot of stagnant water, a lot of hydrophilic vegetation, very high above average temperatures led to, I guess, lack of oxygen in the water column. As a result, there's definitely an impact to the environments that are, I guess, what we manage. We did have quite a bit of complaint along the Trans-Severn Rideau now in terms of how stagnant the water is, but also the stagnancy comes from minimizing flows and trying to preserve the outflows of the reservoirs. So there are always impact to every management practice that we undertake as a result of different conditions, whether they're wet or whether they're dry. This is a busy slide, but this is what we do on a daily basis. We obtain our information in terms of the water levels. We convey to internal staff, our operations. We also convey to external staff, all the hydropower facilities, all municipalities who inquire this information during the emergency seasons, all the conservation authorities, Ministry of Natural Resources, they all receive this information. Also, this information is put into the models as we try to see the inflow forecasting to the best we can. Mother Nature is never, the certainty I only have in the life of water management is uncertainty with weather. It's never certain. It's a busy slide, but that's exactly what we do. We talk to multiple agencies, partners, stakeholders, MPs, if it's necessary. So Environment Canada, whenever we need to justify or confirm the information that we're relaying to the stakeholders, we will make that phone call and ask, is that a right answer to provide to the public? Because this is the responsibility Parksiana has as a federal agency, managing the water levels and flows in the shorelines where you reside. Very complex slide, but this is how many gauges we have. Also, 1/3 of this is across the Rideau Canal. We've got 2 technicians covering the gauges across the Trans-Severn. We've got 1 technician covering the Rideau Canal. Very many gauges, big distance to travel. Sometimes takes half a day just to get to Port Severn for the technician and fix that gauge and travel back. So it's quite a distance to travel. The gauges are remotely accessible, but not all. Halliburton. Great place. I always love driving through and watching the pole. And this is my probably favorite part to come here is observe the Halliburtons and forests that are getting ready for winter. But Halliburton doesn't have a great cellular reception. And I'm sure many of you may experience that. Now, I walked away from the old school and fax. You remember the old line, whatever they are, there was used to be a fax. Well, 3 years ago, the global community of computer science decided not anymore produce the fax modems, they were gone. So we said, okay, well, now we're gonna have to walk away from very reliable, and I'm sure many users here still have the phone line at home that is Bell and it's ground, and it's still working. And it was still working for us, and it was the most reliable service because whenever you have power outage, the Bell line will work. You can still call 911, but right now you can't because there's an outage with the Bell or Rogers or Mass Province outage, they're not reliable. Regardless how well they advertise themselves, they're just not good enough. So we walked away from the fax. We moved the entire system to the cellular modem. But hey, came the Halliburtons, we didn't have great reception here. So we walked into the satellite option. Well, satellite option carries the work with the United States. It's a NOAA platform. Now, recently, and I'm not here to debate on the political climate, we don't know if we're going to still sustain this American support of NOAA satellite information. So we're always in this pivoting stage, we have bad signal reception in some areas of Trans-Severn, the Severn River, the Lake Simcoe still don't have great Bell Rogers coverage. And we also have this potential outage by NOAA and whatever will decide what they're gonna do with the American and Canadian exchange of information. All that is happening in the background. We're trying to solve this, we're trying to pivot for this and figure out if one day you won't see all the levels are posted on a daily basis, we probably run into some kind of issue with either Bell coverage or United States political issues, right? So we are getting ready for everything. We've got the backup for it in terms of it's going to be probably old-fashioned way. Our operators driving to the site and reading the stat page. The same stat page you see right now when you arrive to the site, and then instead they'll send me an email saying, "Hey, you gotta replace Mississauga, we've gotta replace Eel," or probably not for Eels, but in terms of the other locations, whoever visits and sees bad looking stab gauge, please, because it's actually really low levels, and now you can see the bottom of stab gauge that is not in great condition. He'll send me an email saying, "Can your technicians come and replace it?" So if anything happens, we have the contingency. It is manual, but our real-time information is not going to be there. This is the slide that I noted, said, "Oh, it's just way too complicated." Well, this is what I see 24/7. I wake up in the morning and I see this information. These are the tables that I see. Every lake, every location at a site, which is, I'll call it river reach, but it's a river section, I can visualize on an hourly basis. Whenever operations are conducting the adjustments at Mississauga, I will see that adjustment, it's been done, the time of it, I can see it in the hourly information. Our system is also supports the alarms. So all our sector managers in operation will receive the soft alarm, which is an email, and also the hard alarms. You could see my phone to the right, it's a screenshot. You could see at 2:27 a.m. I start getting the text about Stony Lake in Surlau, right? So I mean, there are hard alarms, we like not to activate them, but we do go through this 24/7 management. I'll go into the spring of this 2025. It was a lot of 24/7, a lot of Sundays, a lot of Saturdays, when we virtually don't get off the phone and computer for basically 14 hours straight. This is how powerful the strength of the water when it comes, and that walks you through multiple significant events, the fragilized events, there were events of the rainstorms, there were power line outages as a result of ice storms, etc. So all these events means us right behind the computer operations are in the field, and they're there sometimes 12 to 14 hours a day. The winter was unique, right? I mean, I went through GTA downtown, and it was absolutely chaos. You think that we are prepared for a normal Canadian winters, but no one's ever is. Maybe we just have a short memory of last winter not having enough snow, and all of a sudden no one is ever prepared for this much snow. Operations, in order to conduct changes at a dam, they will have to spend days to dig out the snow and access, which means every pile of snow that we receive, our operations are out the same day, sometimes during a snow event, trying to clean out the snow. There were sites in Washago, there were sites this year where they spent at least a week trying to dig out the access to the dams. So this kind of active winter season has put a good dent on our operations, putting hours and hours, weekends, holidays, etc. They're out making sure that dams are accessible and the roads and bridges are cleared. In the spring with the ice storm, I see a lot of this. Yes, I do see the outside, but I also see this digitally amount of wet or liquid rain. But I actually had this great experience to speak with multiple communities that includes Peterborough as well as Minden, how they were impacted as a result of this ice storm. When we started to speak with these communities, they were right exiting the impact of this ice storm damage. They were not ready to say, "Oh, well, here's Parks Canada saying you're going to get flooded." they were still declaring how many posts are not yet up, how many people without the power. And here's us trying to join at the same time, right early in April, saying, get ready. This is the forecast. We anticipate a very big flows, and we spending there good hours and hours and a half listening to Hydro One, to Bell, to all this services that are still trying to recover from the ice storm, and us pushing that flow through the autonomy. I remember the Holiday Inn where I had to put the aqua dam around the folks downstream, and all this, obviously ice impact, right? You have very quick rise in water levels, the booms are broken. As Colin has mentioned, they're still trying to repair a lot of the areas where the booms are no longer present. The booms are there for safety purposes and saved multiple lives in the past. So this is something that we've seen and experienced, and I've seen how the emergency services are out there 24/7, making sure that there are places for folks to come in, take a shower, eat, etc., whenever they are without any power. Now, we've heard definitely that there were even the bell lines that were down, not just the physical line, but the cell phones were down as a result of this ice storm. My heart always goes to the folks who live in these areas, and then we are there, as Roxanne is saying, well, now it's going to get even crazier. We're going to have the melt, and likely potentially April, maybe, and we've seen April's been, they've been in the past quite wild in terms of amount of rain and impact again onto the system. So it took quite a bit of learning for me to realize that the misery loves company. We've got this ice storm and a lot of people that were impacted, and how emergency services out there. And now for emergency service and Parks Canada getting all this information, saying, well, let's get ready for something else. And are they ready? Do they have resources? Right. This is where they start to step in and discussing. What do we expect in 24/7? What kind of rate of rise in Minden River are you expecting, et cetera, because they want to know how bad the impact will be. Summer, again, after very long spring, when we had continuous snow melting, rain on snow, freeze up of that rain in the snowpack, monitoring and showing multiple lakes, and we kept on managing them. You were seeing them going up and then going down, going up. That's because our operations are there daily, trying to recover the influx of water and cutting back whenever the freeze up happens. So there was very, very, very long spring. Typically, we get the fresh right around end of March, early April. We deal with the May showers. We open for navigation. This year was absolutely different. It just kept on going, and the snowpack remained in Haliburton's all the way until towards, I think, 3rd or 2nd week of April. So it's a pretty long winter. Winter lingered for quite a bit. Summer was very different, and I think it was for me a waiting game. I kept on calling conservation authorities, Minister of Natural Resources. Well, are you seeing the drought? Because I've been seeing it. I've seen no rain in June. All conservation authorities mandate they have to look at 3 months running average totals. So May was wet, April was wet. Here I am in June, seeing all the dry conditions happening. Things are very dry and very quickly, very hot temperatures. But no one else is declaring this kind of a drought, right? Because they have to keep waiting until beginning of August when you actually see, okay, now June and July are dry, May become considered something, but they're seeing now level 1. Very quickly, within 2 weeks, some of the conservation authorities, you could see here on the map to the right, bottom, within 2 weeks, some of them declared level 3 and level 2 as well in the Kawarthas, right? Because they already started to see the natural flowing rivers that were, or creeks that were diminishing below level 3 conditions. But in terms of this total precipitation totals, they were not. They basically told me we can't declare the level drought warning because we just have to wait for this few months of totals, and then we can see it, and then we officially can release this median. Every authority has its own legal mandate. Whatever they release publicly, it has to be justified based on the rules and regulations. While Parks Canada is seeing the drought conditions across the system, it doesn't mean that everyone else in conglomeration will say, okay, yes, media release, we are seeing the same thing, because they have to encounter wetlands, drying wells. They have to bring in municipalities. They have to bring in all the industries such as farmlands, meat industries, et cetera, and say, okay, are you seeing the same thing we're seeing in the rivers and creeks? Is it drying? And yes, let's put together a continuum. Can we declare level 1? Can we declare level 2, et cetera, et cetera? So there has to be multiple stakeholders involved before conservation authority declare that level of drought. Every level of drought has only voluntary water reduction. While you're seeing your neighbor watering a lawn and you know, okay, well, it's really dry, should he or she be doing this? I mean, it stays within us and it's voluntary. No one is going to force someone to reduce the water consumption. It's just really voluntary expectation as a result of this drought conditions. Now, a lot of times you can see this map here to the right. It doesn't cover Halliburton's. That's because we don't have here the conservation authorities, the Ministry of Natural Resources that typically should or would issue the warning for the flooding, but they not necessarily issued the warning or media release for the drought conditions. I've asked before why is the case, and typically what Parks Canada does when we speak with the public, we say, well, there's a fire ban in Halliburton, it's dry. And that's the only justification we may use. But when we speak with the Ministry of Natural Resources, they have certain, I guess, regulation when and how they declare dry conditions. Perhaps they will have the policy revision and this kind of information flow will change. We don't know. But at this point, when we speak with Halliburton's, we say, well, the entire county is subject to the fire ban. Everyone can see it's pretty dry. It's been dry, and not a lot of people like to hear, well, we received, 30% less of precipitation. What does it mean for me? Well, you actually can take a look at the fire ban, and a lot of times, well, oh yeah, it's been dry. Yes, they issued the fire ban. And this year, we actually seen the fires along the Burnt River. I believe it was for at least a week and a half. It was a forest fire.
Yep.
Quite excessive, and it was one along the canal, which is Kirkfield. It was a grass fire. So I think this year was enough justification for the Mother Nature and our environments to show how dry the summer has been. More technical slides that I like to see myself, but I'm sure you may not like, but it just kind of to give you an idea of the behavior of the snowpack. When we look at the total amounts of precipitation, speaking of Environment Canada, seeing our snowpack accumulation, we were seeing quite a bit of the growth in the snowpack. But when we speak with Environment Canada, look at the totals of precipitation, there's really nothing above normal. It's just the snowpack kept on growing. The reason for the growth of the snowpack is we had persistently below 0 degrees Celsius type of weeks and no rain. Winters may have rain. Winters may have some sublimation, they may have warm weeks, and sometimes we lose that snowpack, sometimes we may have some runoff. This past winter just had continuous snowpack growth. Every event that contributed into the snowpack deposition simply stayed there. The rain events or even the ice rain events that happened in March still stayed within the snowpack, so which means snowpack kept on rising again and again. And this is basically what it shows here. This blue line here is the snowpack growth, and only back in early March, when we started to have some of the warm spells and ice rain, we started to lose some of that snow, or the snow started to metamorph and release some of that runoff because it was warmer rain for some period of time. The image to the right only shows the accumulation, the peak accumulation this past winter of snowpack. You can see how some areas were barren of snow, but the lake impact or lake effect, as they call it, was the heaviest towards the areas of Washago, north of Lake Simcoe, Black River, and Kinesis River as well, so the Gull River, right? So that's our lake effect, as they call it in the weather network. You get those snow bands as a result of the Great Lakes have still been open. That's what we've seen this past winter. 2 meters of snow that kept on growing, maybe just condensing, the density increasing, but still the height was there. This year, the area of 7 rivers was subject to very continuous high flow conditions. A lot of complaints, a lot of flooded houses. We've seen pictures with the balconies and doors at least 1 foot behind their glass door. We could see that, so people were impacted. And that's because the Trans-Severn Canal is not built for flood management. While we had all the dams wide open, hydraulic restrictions in the channel were prohibiting for that passage of the water. regardless of what we would have done to manage or best effort management to reduce the outflow, say from, we typically shut off Lake Simcoe and allow the Black River, and I know it's outside of this conversation, but just example of the hydraulic restrictions, folks would still be impacted and flooded. And this flood was in multiple waves, so they were subject to flooding for a good 1 month of no recovery. Ice storm only brought the shut off of the energy, failed pumps, more aggravation, right? So this is something we always say, be prepared, floods may take place. You are situated in unfortunately floodplain areas. Those areas may be flooded at least one in every 2 years, 1 in 5 years. And this kind of accumulation of snowpack, we're normal based on environment Canada. I guess wet winter and spring, but very close to normal. And we say it was some months above normal, some months below normal, like Ted said, December, January were below normal. But again, when we arrived at the end of the May, 460 millimeters versus 418, which is normal, doesn't put us quite far from being normal, right? So as per Environment Canada, it was pretty normal spring, nothing related to the climate change. But we definitely see a very dry summer. We're looking at only 90 millimeters of rain in total versus 251 over 3 months of summer. So you could see the line going up in terms of accumulation, that's the black line, and all of a sudden it plateaus, simply not much rain. Typically in the summer, we get very nice, good rain spells with the thunderstorms, right? This summer it was very sporadic, very hit and miss. And as that shows some of the values, we may get 2 millimeters here, completely missed zone of zero rain, and maybe there's 30 millimeters over one lake out of 45. That was unfortunate. Every time we look at the radar and say, oh yeah, this is where it's going to Burnt River. Finally, this Burnt River is very powerful and provides us with that supply of amended water for Kawarthas. If Burnt River gets enough rain, steady rain, or normal summer rain, you get those spurs of water that we can inflow into the Kawarthas and sustain and augment their drought without drawing up reservoirs. This year, Burnt River was completely missed by all the rain events. It was dry, and I'll show that in the next slide. No, that's Halliburton's, and I'll go back down to the next slide after. This is the Halliburton storage summary. All reservoirs, percent full over time, over the past 50 years. I specifically chose to modify the slide compared to my last slide, is to show the highest maximum values in light blue. These are your historical maximum. In I guess light green is your historical minimum. The bright red is where we at today, the 2025, and there are 2 years that were very similar in terms of where we landed as of early September. But those 2 years, such as 2006 and 2012, had very different beginning in terms of the spring. So you could see that 2012 had likely a lack of snowpack. The snowpack came early, but the parks never filled the reservoirs to the 100%, or they're nearly filled them, but only to 95%, which is pretty dry spring. And then they were drawing the reservoirs for navigation purposes. Now, 2006, very similar to this year. Now you can see that we actually augmented the levels of where reservoirs are at as of September 2nd, and that's because we dramatically reduced all the outflows and allowed the Kawartha lakes to increase. That's where you can see our red line is actually diverting and now going to exceed 2006 drawdown or levels. So we're doing our best here, but we're not at the extremes, and you can see how far we are from that green line. We're way far. Drought management and constraints. I'm just gonna quickly swing back here and show you this. This is our Halliburton flow summary, and that's what I was trying to bring and speak to in terms of the management of the Gulf and Burnt. There's several peaks on the Burnt River. This is a spiky red line. You can see how many times we had to manage the inflow from the Burnt River. Burnt River also spiked right around the end of May, early June, and that's when we closed the navigation. Right, so now you can see how powerful Burnt River and the Gulf River can be as a result of still high flow levels in reservoirs, and us receiving above normal event in May and us shutting down the navigation. What is important to point here is this year, we went way below the normal averages for both rivers. Gull River, that holds all the Gull reservoirs, slid well below the normal average, which means Shadow Lake. All the folks downstream of the Gull Lake were subject to very low levels. Definitely didn't have the complaints because what we do, we proactively speak with those communities. We let them know you may benefit from this dry season because we're drawing the water off the reservoirs. But if we have the opportunity to cut back and hold on to that water in reservoirs, you may drop significantly. And that's what the shadow communities were seeing along the Gull River. Now, the Burnt River, if you look at the actual Water State Canada webpage, probably approach the historical lows. We did our best not to touch the Burnt River reservoirs, just to hold on to historical minimums. The historical minimum is around 2.5 CMS. If you ever wonder if it works at Canada webpage, you can find it from our water level app, but we dropped it to historical minimum, which means drawdown, Drag, Canyon, Glamours, Essen, all those lakes that are contributing to the Burnt River were minimized to the bottom just to sustain the historical low, not minimal low, which is 6 CMS. Historical low, 2.9 CMS. We try to hover right around that value. So we don't break the historical lows, and Burnt River archive likely goes at least for 100 years, or maybe 80 years. Going back to constraint, when we open navigation at the end of May, we had to close navigation for very high flows. In order to open and close, it is a huge amount of work for operations, which means we have to open the dams, and some of them are log dams. As you know, not all of them are gate dams, not all of them mechanized dams, which means log lifters, the manual winches are going in and operations are increasing this flow out. And then we forecast to say we will be able to reopen navigation within 1 week. If you think about the effort that operations are putting, they're basically over the 12 hours work of operations to push that water through the system. First of all, we have to make sure that boats are out. Everyone is worried. The media work that goes into shutting navigation when you just open is exemplary. There are tour boats, there's Voyager, right? There's a lot of economical impact for Parks Canada to say, we just opened, everyone just arrived, and now we're gonna say we are actually closing, and we don't know for how long because it's just a lot of water in the system. This is why we don't like to hold the lakes overfilled. Yes, they may have been held in the past overfilled, but that's no longer the practice. We allow some buffer in the lakes. So a lot of times the people may ask, why aren't you overfilling them? Well, because we won't be able to lower them when this kind of events do arrive. We will not, because the whole entire system will be subject to this amplified levels, shoreline erosion, impact to the docks. Docks are underwater, then we have to reopen the dams. Now, think about it. Now, a lot of people put their docks out, their navigation open, right? This is recreational season starting. And this is when the Parks Canada is saying we're gonna have to close the navigation. We still are limited in the flow we can pass out, because if we pass excessive flows, this may damage the docks as well. The boats are now tied up and being retrieved for this closure and high flows. God forbid, there are kids swimming out there, right? Not always that the children reading the news and media closure, etc., right? So this is recreational season. Who may think in June, I cannot swim along at that beach, right? Because this is when we always make sure that we do not close navigation. This is my hourly priority. I try to do my best, and I strive when we don't close. But this year just got us off guard, this kind of event, even though we managed everything at 95% or so. Now, when we flush that water, and this year what happened is, as we were flushing the water, came the drop. I mean, that it started to dry up, it started to heat up, the high temperatures, and as we were reducing to reopen the canal, we are cutting back the outflow. But the drought and the evaporation and heating up and the loss of inflows are actually faster than we are doing the reduction. Those are all log dams. We have to keep that in mind. Jacking of the dams. Now, when we're passing high flows, a lot of debris through the winter and spring, a lot of tree logs, a lot of booms are broken. And now we are closing the dams and close them very fast. Sometimes we have trees, sometimes we have debris stuck under the dams, which means it's sometimes not possible to cut back within the flow that you're looking for, because those are log dams, they're not gates. That means for operations to come back, open up, clean it up, right? So you have to, you will see how much work it goes into reduction of the flows, especially when the dry conditions are happening. And of course, the city intake, well, treatment plants and environmental flows. We have all these requirements that we have to sustain. The fish spawn right in the spring as well. We must maintain certain flows for the fish spawners as well. So I walked through the slide. Great Kawartha Lakes, you could see two high flow events, one in the March and April. This is when we had very high levels along the Otonabee, water on the roads as well. I'm not sure if anyone has gone through, but that was immediately after this ice storm. So the Otonabee and Minden definitely has gone through quite two emergency events with very high levels and flows, as well as preceding that broken hydro lines, lack of power at home, and some pumps not working. And the second event, this is when we're trying to flush the Kawartha Lakes. Right immediately after that, and I can't see them up here, but you could see right after reopening of navigation, the flows went down to bare minimum. And this is us seeing the dry condition, shutting the outflows to bare minimum. Now we tried over the past 2 months, we kept on cutting cube by cube, 2 CMS by 2 CMS. We actually dropped the outflows through the Otonabee River below the historical averages. To speak in numbers, it's around 17 CMS. We went down to 11 CMS this year. Why? We've got brand new dams. We actually are capable of jacking and sealing those brand new dams without any leakages. But it doesn't happen within 1 week. It takes weeks for each dam, for each reduction, for each cube to be cut through that system. So you could see how we stayed and reacted immediately. Right back on June, I think 15th here, you can see the flows of the Otonabee River went down to minimum. We were seeing the dry conditions. The system was responding and we were responding as well. Kawartha Lakes, on average, they are declining below their full supply, and this decision that was made by Parks Canada back in end of July, that early August we will start to preserve reservoirs as much as we can. Decision by lowering the Kawartha Lakes, meaning they will be drifting or being lowered below their full supply. This decision is typically made historically towards September when the boat traffic is less, evaporation rates are less. This year, the decision was made to conduct it sooner whenever we get those opportunities with the localized rain events and evaporation trends are declining. As you've seen for the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the temperatures have gone down. We have that ability to cut back from reservoirs and lower the Kawartha Lakes. Are they struggling? Absolutely, yes. We are seeing the emails and questions from both Halliburton's and the Kawartha Lake to the stranded boat. This is the system where we apply the integrated system-wide approach. Lowering of reservoirs and lowering of the Kawartha Lakes is being done with understanding that we are preserving both locations. In the past, what I've seen when I looked at this kind of years is the reservoirs were overdrawn below their winter sets. But then comes the end of September, the logs are placed back in, which means very low flow through the Gull and Burnt, nearly swamplands. We do not want this to happen. This year, we are doing our best to make sure that we don't surpass the winter set, which means we will aid to pull the last logs towards the end of September to allow this flow to be present along the Burnt and Gull. Unfortunately, last year we've seen this kind of low flow conditions, as Ted mentioned, very dry, cold. There's not much we can do about this kind of forecast, but this may happen. What happens during dry fall, even though you do have some flow, there are beaver dams. Beaver dams are active, and especially this summer, whenever we pulled some of the reservoirs, we've never seen that water because the water just dissipates into some lowland wetlands, or it just even half a CMS, which could be vital in my calculation. And there's not much for Kawarthas, but I never see that half a CMS. Severn and I spoke about this, but Lake Simcoe definitely suffered quite a bit of damage this year along the shorelines. The management of the Severn River with that high snowpack was quite difficult, very elongated, and quite operationally intense. We had helicopters flying by Hydro One to fix some of the hydro lines for swift rapids. That was the response. Within 24 hours, understanding that the flooding is potentially imminent and we must restore the hydro lines. So there was quite a bit of municipal emergency services activities, MPs, etc., were involved in this kind of concilium to help and manage the water flows throughout this year. That was one of the quite long and difficult springs. We always say what's going to happen this fall and winter, and I love to always like to look at the long-term forecast. We are in weak La Nina. What means weak for us? We will likely see mild winter, which means potentially will be melting and freezing. It will change. But whenever it is a mild winter, and then they're saying it's a cooler, mild winter, whenever they say it's cooler, and that means we're going to have more precipitation. So the long-term forecast is a good snowfall potential. Will we get enough water to recover our reservoirs by fall, by end of November? It's highly uncertain. Long-term forecast still keeps the drier than normal fall, but the winter promises to have back our snowpack and recover reservoirs. Have we seen in the past the reservoirs don't recover? I haven't. It's just more driven by the type of the winter and the snowpack. They may recover, but not to 95%, but you know, canal existed for so many years and reservoirs were there as well. We typically have very short memory, and as we've seen 2025 is dry, and I've seen the emails and calls, we've never seen it dry, well, we could see 6 and 12. 10 years ago were very similar and even worse. So this kind of droughts do happen, floods do happen every 5, every 2, every 10 years. It's the frequency of occurrence, and it's pretty much normal based in North Canada. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna, for a very comprehensive presentation on what we've been through. We're running a bit behind time, but are there any questions that we should deal with here? Will?
So this year, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of weather impacts on the system. One of the things that was brought up by our Lake Association was the fact that Parks Canada had made the Trent 7 free for voters this year. Could you speak to the impact of the water usage as to the lock operations, and if the Trent 7 saw an appreciable increase in the use of the locks this year?
That would have to be deferred to our communication. And if Ryan can speak to this in terms of the policy of making the free lockage and what Parks Canada has released to the public in regards to the free lockage, in terms of the use of the locks as a result of increased traffic, there's very minimal impact.
The question related, the question related as to whether the possible increased usage of the locks this year had affected levels. I think we have seen, though, in your graphs that the minimum flow achieved on the Autonomy River, which is required at Peterborough and beyond, was not higher than normal. It was the minimum flow that was achieved, not, and as Anna said, it wasn't the flow from the locks and the dams, the operations.
But that's something you've made a comment to, and I'd just like to correct it a bit. During the very hot summer months in this past summer, and that actually brought the example of more of August with the lesser operation. In order to level off the recession of the Kawartha Lakes as a result of operation, sometimes we have to pass more than twice the flow from reservoirs. So which means if this example from this summer, we were passing around 12 to 13 CMS from the Kawartha Lakes down, we would be pushing 38 CMS at least from Halliburton's to offset the evaporation demand on the Kawartha Lakes. This is how much evaporation, not the lockages, not the intakes, not municipal withdrawal of water. It's really evaporation that took place. And I think you've seen from my images, there was a heat dome. It was very hot summer. This summer that actually was fueling evaporation rates to a very high degree. So
Curious, just to expand on that, it has to include what the rate of rapid velocity would be. And I know there's 1,000 different variables, but if a lake is running, I'm just picking numbers out of thin air, 50 meters a second, or cubic per second, how much additional loss could be attributed to
Well,
rapid velocity?
Just to give you the mathematical answer here, if you take 38 CMS minus 12 CMS,
Okay.
right, that gives you what,
That's
that's evaporation loss. 1 centimeter on tri lakes is 14 CMS. So you could see all the Kawartha lakes, including Bowsen, Cameron, Scugog, Sturgeon, tri lakes together contributing to that. So you're looking at probably just less than a half a centimeter of evaporation from the lakes on a very good, nice, hot, windy day.
There were a lot of windy days, so to that even to work with.
That's right, yeah.
That gives us a good picture of just how important the evaporation was. There any other? Yes, back here.
So first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much. I think I understood about 80% of what you said.
That's good.
I got,
Better.
the bottom line was, I think you've tried very, very hard to protect the entire watershed, and thank you for that. Second, what is dam jacking?
Oh, maybe Colin on the line can speak to that. That's a great, because that's asking the ending question in operation, so.
The question is, what is dam jacking?
All right. Can everyone hear
We can
me
hear you.
here for dam jacking? All right. So dam jacking. So you have a stop log spillway, and let's say there's 10 logs in that spillway, a single spillway, and then on some of the dams down at the bottom we have like 17 spillways or whatever in it. That doesn't particularly matter, but when you put the stop logs in, if you can imagine, sometimes they don't go flush all the way down to the bottom and they're not a nice clean stack. So when you drive by them, you'll see water shooting through. So what we do is go below the dam deck with bottle jacks and steel bars. So if you haven't used a bottle jack, so kind of like a car jack, but more of a bottle jack. And we actually put the pressure, put the jack on top of the logs, put the bar underneath the deck or underneath jacking pegs, and we'll put a bar across and we'll put that pressure down. And what it does is it squishes the logs down and reduces that leakage through. So when you drive by and there's a nice tight dam and you can't see, very little leakage going through the stop logs at all, if we have the dam shut off, that shows you we've almost definitely jacked it, because it's very, very difficult with some of these deeper spillways to ever get a nice tight seal just by putting the stop logs in. So when Anna's doing a lot of her work, especially on the Otonabee River, it's not that difficult to get to 25, 30 CMS, right? We can do that pretty easily. But every CMS we go below that, there's people going below the stop logs. And when we're doing that, especially for these little river reaches, Anna's got to watch as they're jacking the logs down, because it's reducing the flow for the next river reach down. So all of a sudden, this one is shooting up. This one is dropping when you're on the Otonabee River, because they're very small, very, very small sections, and they fill up. So little changes in flow result in big oscillations in the water level. So it takes us quite a bit of while to get these, minor improvements out of it. So you would start off on the Otonabee River, you might start at dam lock 19 and fix that one, and then work your way back up. So it can be days and days of work, and you're gaining 1 or 2 CMS each stop log spillway, and then you have to pull a log out of another spillway to offset how much you've jacked. So it's very time consuming, and it's very difficult to balance on these very small river reaches. So that's what jacking is, but it's part of our business, and we do it, and we do it a lot.
And I think it's important to mention cindering. So whenever the jacking does not work, there could be a tree or tree branches stuck as a result of high flow. So when we were shutting the flows to reopen down to safe, the logs are being placed, the debris stuck. We use cindering, we use bags with material just to clog that hole. It not always works. Maintenance are back again with more cindering, more material to block it. Sometimes, some multiple materials they use. And I remember calling back 2016, they were even using the mattresses right? Old mattresses to block the holes, and we do everything we can, and operations are back daily just to keep doing their best. Because when you're down to very low flows and all of a sudden you say, oh, wow, this is actually a tree branch that's stuck there, you cannot reopen the dam because you'll drain that reach and you cannot recover. There's no flow there upstream to refill it. So we are stuck trying to fix that little hole that's causing us, the flow requirements from Kimis or Mississauga. As you said, easy flow fix for us. It's kind of true because it's larger lakes and historically it's been used for that. But what I mean, every cube matters when you go into this very dry condition. And it does take jacking of Hastings Dam. It's one of the also old dams. It does take jacking of the Heedy log dam, and there was leakage this year, and they tried their best, and Colin was there multiple times with the hydraulic jack. All the system downstream must be jacked upwards for us to just cut back that 2 CMS at Lake Catchmanuka, cut back then towards us, and then we can cut down. And a lot of times you'll see more lake bouncing up and down. That's Elliott Falls because okay, we've got that cube, cut back cube, but Elliott Horseshoe 12 mile, right? So we try to do our best because of all these preservation modes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I think we need to move on to the last couple of items on our agenda. They're important, but they may not take us, they're not going to generate the number of questions that we've had here. Anna, thank you so much for being here. She started the morning with a flat tire. So. So I'd like to introduce Bruce McLennan, the Vice Chair of CEWF, who's going to give us a quick rundown on our activities and priorities of the last year. Which one are we looking at here? Yeah, there it is. Good. There it is.
That is a very tough act. Well, holy smokes. Great presentation by Anna, which is much appreciated. My job here today, and I will try and move along quite quickly, is to tell you what the CEWF, your executive, have been doing for the past year. Really, as our report to you, the members of these coalition, to justify the massive fees we charge you. So the first slide just indicates one of our most important things, of course, is our communications with Trent-Severn Waterway. And I think you've gotten a very good feel for that here this morning. As Ted mentioned, he speaks with Anna often on a weekly basis, sometimes even more frequently than that, to understand their water management actions and to allow us to pass that information on to you, our members. We do that in a number of different ways. One of the most important things, of course, is our website, and I encourage everyone to, if you haven't already, explore cewf.ca. We take the water management information that we receive, and as I said, we pass it on to you. Things included on the website, for example, are the water management updates that Trent-Severn make periodically when there are critical things going on. Those updates go on our website. I will tell you that they tend to be a little bit generic, so we often add a bit of information that we have that goes a little bit beyond what they say. So it's valuable to have a look at that. We've mentioned the drawdown forecast. Ted has gone over that. Those are posted on our website.
And as well, if there are special advisories as there have been with, for example, the low water conditions this year, we do post those on the website. So you can access those by getting, as we have said, if you get our e-blast and sign up to the website advisories, then those will come to you in your email. We do respond as well to the lake associations with specific requests. We get inquiries that we try and deal with on an individual basis. So if you have a question through the year, if your membership has a question through the year, don't be afraid to go online to our email and send us the question. We'd be glad to try and answer. We every year offer to the members an opportunity to have one of the executive speak at your annual general meetings. We did 9 of those this year. We're always glad to try and accommodate those requests, both if they have a specific reason for making the request, or if you just want a general overview of what's happening, we're glad to try and respond. The other part of our sort of communications with the Lake Association members is our annual communication meeting today, and to bring you the Trent Severn perspective and our kind of overview of what that has meant. Okay, the other thing in terms of communication, we communicate with the, we communicate both with the municipalities and the public at large. With the municipalities, it's often during the spring runoff period, and Anna has gone through some of the information that she shares with the Ministry of Natural Resources and the municipalities, and there's often a meeting by telephone with those 3 organizations as they coordinate activities for the spring runoff, particularly in a year like this year. We don't get directly involved in that because you know, we want to be careful to let them do their thing. But we are in very close touch with that with TSW during that period to make sure we understand what's coming down the line and try and communicate that back to our members. Another thing that we started very recently is a biannual 1-page summary of water management issues. That goes out to our Lake Association members, as well as to the anybody who is subscribed to email information. We also send it to all of the councillors of each of the municipalities and to the 7 CAOs of the municipalities plus the county. And it gives them an overview of water management issues and a few facts that they might not be aware of in terms of overall water management. So that has started this year with a summer report that we sent out, and as I said, it is going to occur biannually. And finally, when there's trouble in the works, whether it's unusual spring runoff or an ultimately very low water year, we use the public records. For example, the Highlander. If you looked at the Highlander last week, you would have seen the headline warning about low lake levels. This was us acting, acting with the Highlander in order to warn our members if in fact they need to get boats out early. And as Ted said, we are 3 or perhaps even 4 weeks ahead on some lakes ahead of, yeah, no, I'll find it again. There. If we're ahead of normal. So when necessary, we will use the local publications. And finally,
Could I just
there are
jump
some
in?
kind of special projects that we do. You may remember last year we had the 2 videos that we produced. One talking about the overall operations of the Trent Severn waterway, and another talking about what you can do to prepare your waterfront for both high and low water levels. This
Could
year,
I just jump in for a minute?
is we're monitoring very closely the work that Halliburton County is doing on their floodplain mapping project. And I will tell you that if you now go to halliburtoncounty.ca, that's the Halliburton County website, you track through and you find their GIS mapping. One of the projects there is the floodplain mapping project. And it will give you, for the riverine sections of Halliburton County, so in particular around Minden, for example, but also some of the other riverine sections, you will see the new calculated design flood level, okay? And that will be either the 100-year flood or what they call the regional storm. So if you're interested in seeing how the 100-year flood would affect Minden, for example, those flood lines are there. And we've had a number of comments to the county on things like their frequently asked questions and other elements of their project, which we haven't been totally comfortable with. It is a work in progress. They are listening to us, and they have promised to come back to us before they go totally public with the information they have. The final thing I would point out on that is they have included on all of the reservoir lakes the historic high water level plotted on the map. So if you want to zoom in on your property, you can see where the historic high water level would fall on your lakefront property. That is not a calculated 100-year flood level. That is actually the historic. We've had a few comments with Halliburton County on that as well. A couple of things that we don't think are quite right, but that notwithstanding, on most of the lakes, you can actually get that flood level. Another thing that we looked at this year was a fisheries investigation. We, like has been asked by a number of our Lake Association members, we got thinking, we're told that the early October minimum level, the winter set level, is driven by trout spawn. And the idea there is that the trout spawn in the shallows, and if you draw water level down below that early October level, there's a risk that the trout eggs will freeze or be subject to predation. So that makes sense. And then we asked ourselves, well, wait a minute, what if there aren't any trout in the lake? And then what if some of the trout in the lake actually spawn deeper? And there are cases like that. So we went to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry to try and get some information on that. Initially, they came back with sort of some positive feedback that they could help us. To be honest, at the end of the day, we weren't able to get any solid information on fisheries from them. At the end of the day, we have also learned, though, that that's not critical. I mean, there are a number of other environmental reasons for bringing the lakes down to that early October minimum level. Things like levels of access for beaver to the beaver lodges, amphibians which hibernate in the benthic material starting in the October period. So there's a number of good environmental reasons for getting the lakes down to that October level, despite the fact that many of us would like to see that level not occur until November. Final point I would mention, we've had some discussions with Trent Severn on their lake level graphs. I hope many of you have accessed those. You can either get to them on the CEWF website, or you can go directly to the Trent Severn water level graphs on their website. We talked to them about more comprehensive discussion on explaining the intricacies of the graphs and the tables that Ted went over earlier. At the end of the day, they listened to us, but we decided that the best way to go about doing that was to put that interpretive information on our own website. So if you go to our own website, cewf.ca, there's a new section there on how to interpret the graphs and tables that occur there. Also, how to access previous years' graphs, which are valuable if you want to see what happened a few years ago. So that's all I had to say. We've had a busy year, and looking forward to another one, hopefully not quite as dramatic. So any quick questions? Yes, sir.
Bruce, thanks for that. Related to the fisheries investigation, it was mentioned on one of the other slides, it's Jim Prince from Kinesis Lake. We did a unique project this year. We did a full aquatic inventory of Kinesis with 1,000 grid points around the lake, looking at abundance and richness of the aquatic plants. We also did that with U-Links on Growler, Lipsey, and the Redstone lakes. And not surprising, Kinesis and Redstone with the drawdown had a much less abundance of aquatic plants. And the two lakes that aren't drawdown were Growler and Lipsey. I think there's an opportunity to do a little bit more of that work and tie it into fisheries, because the aquatic health of the lakes and the benthic health of the lakes, you have lots of data for it, is really tied to the fishery as well. So perhaps over the next little while, those of us working on that, so start having a chat with CEWF and then Parks Canada to see if there's an opportunity to do some work in it.
Okay, well, that would be welcome. For those of you online who didn't hear the comment, it was from Jim Prince at Kinesis, saying that they have done some active investigation as to the aquatic life, both vegetative and the fisheries, looking at the impacts of drawdown on that, and suggesting that we work together to look at it a bit further. So fair enough, Jim? Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce.